Well, hi, friends, and happy Wednesday. I hope you're having a great week so far and that you are getting excited about celebrating Good Friday and Easter Sunday this coming weekend. Now, when we look at the Gospels to see what happened on the Wednesday of Holy Week, the Gospels are relatively silent. It looks like very little actually happens on Wednesday, so much so that there are some people who believe that Jesus stayed put on Wednesday and stayed in Bethany just spending time with his followers. However, as we've seen earlier in the week, the Gospel of Luke tells us that Jesus was in the temple every day teaching the people. And so I'm guessing that Jesus probably went through that usual routine that he had established. However, today, as we look at the Wednesday of Holy Week, I do want to focus on two individuals and their stories of what happened on the Wednesday of Holy Week. And so first we're told in Mark chapter 14 that the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. Now, this sets the scene for our second story. The first story is actually sandwiched into between two parts of that second story. But notice what we're first told. We're told that that Passover, that Last Supper meal that Jesus is going to have, is going to happen in 2 days. And if you remember, while that does happen on Thursday evening, because it happens after sunset, the way that the Jewish people kept time, that was technically a part of Friday. So 2 days before would have been on the Wednesday. Now here, what we're going to see is Mark tells us about a woman who anoints Jesus with perfume. But before we read this story, I want to let you know that all four Gospels have an account of a woman anointing Jesus with perfume. However, they're not all the same. Matthew and Mark are pretty much telling the same story. The details seem almost identical. But Luke shares an account of Jesus being anointed much earlier in his ministry. You can find the story in Luke chapter 7, and there are many details that are different. John also has an account of Jesus being anointed, and he has it taking place the day before Jesus' triumphal entry on Palm Sunday. However, some of the details that John shares with us are also different from what we see in Matthew and Mark. And so many people have wondered, well, why are there these very differing accounts and tellings of Jesus being anointed? And some have said, well, this is a reason why we can't trust the Bible. But friends, I think it's very likely that Jesus could have been honored and anointed in a similar way by different people. If somebody is willing to go and take some perfume and anoint Jesus with it as a way of honoring him and thanking him and expressing their love to him, then maybe it was more normal than what we realize. And it's very possible that other people could have done the same thing. And so in light of these different accounts, it's most likely that Matthew and Mark are talking about the same event, whereas Luke and John are probably referring to different times when Jesus was anointed. And so because of this, we're going to focus specifically on Matthew and Mark's telling of this story. And so let's pick up the story in Mark chapter 14, starting at verse 3. While Jesus was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Now some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare me for my burial. Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." And so here in this story, Jesus is spending some time in the house of Simon the leper. Now, we don't know much about Simon the leper except that he was a leper. And I can assure you he probably wasn't a leper at this point. Back then, leprosy was a terrible, terrible disease. And anyone who had leprosy was not allowed to live in the community with everyone else. They had to go live off on their own or with other lepers so as not to spread leprosy to everyone else. And so because of that, Simon wouldn't have been living in Bethany and inviting people into his house. And so Simon was most likely an individual that Jesus had miraculously healed from his leprosy. And so here Jesus is in the home of Simon. Simon's probably taking care of him and loving on him because of his miraculous healing. And while Jesus is reclining at the table, an unnamed woman comes in with a jar of perfume, and she proceeds to pour it over his head. Jesus calls it an anointing for his burial. But some of those present didn't like it. And we can see why. We're told that the perfume was worth a year's wages. I mean, can you imagine a bottle of perfume valuing like $40,000 to $50,000? It's no wonder those present thought that it should have been sold and the money given to the poor. But notice what Jesus said. He said, "The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me." Now that's a really big statement. And I don't think Jesus was comparing himself as an individual and the value of an individual to maybe the category of poor people in general. I think Jesus was saying, hey, here I am, you won't always have me, and I am incredibly valuable. In fact, I'm more valuable than the poor, all of those poor people that money could have helped. Now, that would have been a very arrogant thing to say if he was anything other than the Son of God. But Jesus is the Son of God. However, not everyone felt the same way. If we pick up the story now in Matthew chapter 26, verse 14, we're told, "Then one of the 12 disciples, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, 'What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?' So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. And from then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over." Judas was getting ready to betray Jesus. Why? Because Judas didn't like what he saw. In John's gospel, we're told that Judas was a thief. In fact, in John chapter 12, verse 6, it says that as keeper of the money bag, Judas used to help himself to what was put into it. And so Judas wanted the perfume to be sold and the money entrusted to him. Then he would have access to it and he could steal it, he could spend it however he wanted. But I don't think that this was Judas's only issue. I also believe that Judas didn't think that Jesus was who he said he was, the Messiah and the Son of God. Judas doubted the identity of Jesus. And so we have this comparison between these two individuals within these two stories. We have this comparison between Judas on the one hand and this unnamed woman on the other hand. And Matthew and Mark are using this comparison to ask us the most important question we could ever be asked. Who is Jesus to you? And what they've done is by only sharing the stories of these two individuals is they're only giving us two options or two ways to respond. We can either agree with the unnamed woman that Jesus is God, that he is worth the $50,000 bottle of perfume and that he is everything to us, or we can agree with Judas, that Jesus isn't God, that he's not worth that kind of extravagance, and he's not everything to us. You see, Matthew and Mark don't include a middle ground. They don't mention in their stories an account of what happened. They don't mention a crowd that's there listening and watching, debating and wondering over the identity of Jesus. There's no crowd in this story, and so there's no third option. A decision must be made. Is Jesus worth everything to you, or is he nothing to you? Now, this might sound a little bit extreme, but this is the kind of thing that Jesus said throughout his ministry. A quick example can be found in Luke chapter 9, verses 23 and 24, where Jesus said, "If anyone would come after me as my disciple, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will save it." And so, friends, we are given this choice on the Wednesday of Holy Week. Do we agree with Judas that Jesus isn't who he said he is? That Jesus is just a phony, a con artist, an insane person, demon-possessed, the worst of the worst? Or do we agree with the unnamed woman that Jesus truly is the Son of God? That he is everything to us, and we are willing to give everything for Jesus. It's kind of like how C.S. Lewis said, Jesus is either who he said he is, or he is the devil, an insane person, a lunatic, or possessed by an evil spirit. He can't be a good moral teacher. He can't be just a nice guy. And so we're left with that question. Who is Jesus to you? Have a great Wednesday, and we'll see you tomorrow.